was a shadow in the government's game. Pawn as a child with no face and no name. They stole my past to leave me cold and alone. Always searching for a place I could call home. I was lost in the dark, just a tool in the hand, till she pulled me close and helped me understand. Now the fire inside is starting to rise. I can see the truth through 1,000 lies. Now I tear through the veil, leave holes in the sky. I can read every thought in the blink of an eye. Danica, my witch, she's the magic in me. Yeah, I finally found what they took from me. With a hellhound beside me, I'm standing my ground. No longer a ghost that's never been found. In the dead of the night, I can hear the call. All the ghosts of my past scratching through the wall. My eyes change colors, the power has grown. With Crowley the Hound, I'm never alone. I used to be hollow, a man made of glass, but now I am reclaiming every year that has passed. Every memory is falling right back into place. I know every name and I remember every face. Now I tear through the veil, leave holes in the sky. I can read every thought in the blink of an eye. Danica, my witch, she's a magic in me. Yeah, I finally found what they took from me. With a hell on beside me, I'm standing my ground. No longer a ghost that's never been found. I ain't running no more, yeah, I'm ready to fight. Gonna settle that debt in the depth of the night. They tried to break me, they tried to erase, but they can't hide the blood from the scars on my face. The veil is thin and the engine is hot. I'm taking back everything that they thought I forgot. Now I tear through the veil, leave holes in the sky. I can read every thought in the blink of an eye. Danica, my witch, she's the magic in me. Yeah, I finally found what they took from me. With a tailhound beside me, I'm standing my ground. No longer a ghost that's never been found. I remember it all now. Every single face, I'm calling for you in the dead of the night.
Hello, everybody. My name's Henry. For those of you that don't know, for those of you that do, welcome back. Tonight I'm going to tell you a little story about some cursed wild boys. They end up being ghosts, but they started out being just little wild boys of the woods. And this story takes place up there on Liberty Ridge. It's a place that I'm familiar with. Know a few people up there. Those people don't take kindly to strangers. If you got a purpose up there, you're fine. But if you go up there disturbing those people, messing with them, they say the hills will take care of their own. They will. And this story started out in the late to middle 1960s. There was a husband and wife that come from parts unknown. Nobody really knew nothing about them. They did have a big chunk of money, and they bought them about 10 acres up there on Liberty Ridge. It wasn't farmable or anything like that. It was just secluded. Nearest neighbor, probably about a mile or two down the valley. Well, they set to building them a little shack. That woman, she was pregnant. Well, it was a little 2-room shack. They even got creek rocks and made them a chimney. Nice little spring just down at the foot of the hill there. It was just up above Sugar Creek. Well, it come the day, and his husband and wife, they wasn't the best kind of people. But the locals didn't know that right at that time. Well, she had 2 twin boys. Twin baby boys. Well, that father, he didn't work a lick nowhere. They don't know where he come up with that money to buy that little chunk of ground, but he did her somehow. Well, they stayed to themselves. They didn't have a vehicle. They just had a couple of mules and an old flatbed trailer wagon. They didn't have anything when they showed up there, but around the area, people soon started missing eggs, sometimes a chicken. Sometimes they go to milk their old Jersey milk cow, and she'd done been milked. Well, come to find out, that's how these people were surviving. Mom being tended to the babies and breastfeeding them babies, and Dad go out at nighttime and steal a few chickens, maybe some eggs. In the summertime, he even been known to go steal tomatoes out of a garden, cabbage, corn, you name it. Well, people couldn't prove it was him, but it was damn funny that it didn't start until them 2 babies was born up there in that shack. Well, some people started kind of trying to figure out who was doing this. Nobody in the neighborhood would do that. Otherwise, they'd have been shot up there, thrown in some ravine, or tossed in a deep ditch that had been dug and filled in. Nobody'd ever know. Law didn't go up there. They tried to stay the hell away from there because they had a law of their own up there. You didn't go messing around with them old boys because you'd have that whole hillside to fight. Cops knew better. They figured whatever happened up there, they'll take care of their own. Well, some of the locals had a talk about it one night and decided that some of them would go up there and just welcome them to the neighborhood, the area. And just kind of have a look-see on what these people may be doing. Well, 4 guys got picked, and they decided they was going to do things first the nice way. So their wives made some pies and even a couple of cured hams and some apple cider for them to drink, even a jug of moonshine. Come up into that mix. There was a bushel basket of apples and a couple big bags of turnips and just kind of like a care package. Well, they loaded on the old wagon and they headed up there to that cabin. Well, that ride was a long ride and it was pitch black out. Them hills, the only time they see light during the day. Nighttime moonlight didn't even pass down there. I think the moon was even scared of those people. Well, as they rode, some of them smoked their pipes and others were spitting chewing tobacco over the side of the wagon. And you can bet there was probably some moonshine being passed around could knock off the chill. Well, it was a good little ride, but them mules took them right on up there. They're sure-footed. Well, they got up to that cabin, and they looked and seen gray smoke coming out the chimney, and there was a light there in the window. So they lit their lanterns and held them up where they could be seen. They climbed down with the wagon, the guys did, and walked up, knocked on the door, and introduced themselves, and the guy just kind of stared at them like they was a piece of meat and he was a hungry dog. And they was like, we don't want no trouble, we're just from the neighborhood, kind of like a welcome committee, and we got some stuff out here that we'd like to offer you. Don't know nothing for it, just it's a welcoming present. Well, the guy had his shotgun in his hand, and he told the wife, he said, you stay here, I'll be right back. Well, he walks out there with them and looks in there, and while his eyes get as big as saucers. So they start carrying the stuff up to the house, and the guy was thanking them, and they said, oh, by the way, y'all wouldn't want a few chickens, would you? Wanted to see what this guy would say. He was like, well, we haven't gotten around to getting any chickens yet. So, you know how they always say, loose lips sink ships? You give somebody a little bit of jug courage, and they tend to say things that normally they just wouldn't say. And this one guy spoke up and he goes, now when we bring you some chickens in a couple days, watch out, because somebody's going around the neighborhood stealing chickens, milking people's cows, and stealing the eggs. The guy never flinched. He said, I think we can take care of our own. But I appreciate it, neighbor. The guy was like, well, damn, he didn't even flinch. So after they talked for a little bit and shared some tobacco, the guys was like, well, we don't want to keep you. We're going to head back down into the valley, and we'd have been here earlier, but we have a lot of stuff to do during the day. You know, we work our fields and orchards and stuff, and by the time we got everything rounded up, it was after dark, and we just wanted to drop some things off and welcome you to the neighborhood. The guy said, thanks, I appreciate it. He wasn't none too friendly. Well, they noticed that woman had 2 babies in there. So they were trying to be nice instead of yanking him out there in the yard and horsewhipping him. Kind of a warning. We know what you're doing. I'd stop before you get caught. That's what the hint was. Well, they went back down into the valley and talked a while at the little clubhouse down there. And they're like, do you think he got the hint? One guy said, I sure hope he did. If not, we'll deal with it, like we do everything else. Well, we'll just let things go for the time being and see what he does. So the meeting broke up, and the guys went to their houses. With this guy, they figured, you know, with all the food and stuff they took up there, that he surely wouldn't be out doing it for at least a few days anyway. He had plenty of food. They took it up there and dropped it off. Well, nobody had seen hide or hair of this family, and come Sunday, the preacher, little church down there, the preacher's like, maybe I ought to go up there and welcome them to the church. You can try, but he ain't none too friendly. So the preacher and his wife at the church took the buckboard and went up there to that old cabin where them people lived and started to knock on the door, and the guy answered the door with a shotgun. Well, the guy that lived there noticed it was a preacher. He lowered his gun and he said, "Something I can do for you, Father?" I said, "Well, we're just wanting to know if you'd like to come in church sometime." Well, this guy just right down horse shitty. He said, "I don't think so." And he goes, "Well, maybe your wife would like to have a Bible." He said, "I don't think so." He said, "I'd appreciate you get the hell off my land and don't come back." He slammed the door in his face. So the preacher and his wife set some food down there on the little stoop. And they did as the guy asked. He left. Well, went on a couple of weeks and the stealing began again. These guys are getting pretty pissed. So they'd lay in wait. Never could catch this guy. I mean, they would lay here thinking, okay, this place is going to be hit. He wouldn't show up. They lay at this place the next night. Never could catch him. Well, the whole time, them babies is growing. When them boys reach about 7, 8 years old, the dad and mom been beating on them boys and told them, said, "Me and your Paul's getting too old to be taking care of you. Now you get your asses out there, learn a trade with your Paul, and then he can stay home and you guys can go out there and gather food for us." Well, that first year, every time the guy would go to steal stuff, them boys would go. But after that, it was up to them to provide for the two parents. Well, they worked in relays. One boy would set up high and watch, while the other boy would go steal a chicken, steal some eggs, steal some turnips, maybe steal a ham. Then the next night, the other boy would have to steal while the other one doesn't look out. Well, they'd done this for a few years now, and they get pretty proficient at it. Well, the boys finally reached the ripe age of probably about 16, 17 years old maybe. And they went out one night, decided that people may start figuring out, so they would go a little further this time. Well, they made a fatal mistake. They went way up there in those hills and dropped way down in those valleys and come across an old cave to back up in the brush along this creek. Man, there's some good smell coming from that cave. It's lit up. Big old fire in there. Well, they could smell ham, bacon, and eggs. Well, they was hungry. And them boys couldn't help it. They'd get closer and they'd look. Get a little closer and they'd look. But they kept seeing this shadow in there moving inside that cave. Finally, they got up to the entrance of that cave and they hatched a plan. They found them a big, giant rock. One was going to go in steel, and the other one's gonna sit there at that big rock. And as the one come out with the food, if anybody chased him, that boy was gonna clunk him with a rock right on top of the head. So the boy got ready, took off a running in that cave. He reached down, grabbed a handful of bacon, shoved it in his mouth. Couldn't get the egg, they were still cooking on the skillet on top of that open fire. There was a ham hanging. That boy grabbed that big ham and threw that over his shoulder and took off. And I'll be damned, there was something coming behind him. So he run past the opening of the cave where his brother was waiting with that big rock. Well, this hooded figure come out of that cave, and he had that rock ready up over his head. When that thing come out that cave after his brother, he got ready for that rock and he slammed it. Nothing, the rock just hit the ground. This shadowy figure turned around and looked at him, and he said, "If you want to live tonight, you best get your brother back here. I got one hell of a deal for you. You can keep the ham, but I want you to get his ass back here." So he whistles a few times like a bob white quail, and here come his brother peeking through the woods. He goes, "Get over here, boy. I'll make you a deal. You can have all the food in my cave on one condition. Those parents of yours got to go." But them two boys, they was getting tired of getting hell beat out of them. Sent out, they were just wild boys, never went to school. Never learned to read and write. Well, that shadowy figure stuck his hand out, old bony hand out there. Both them boys shook that thing's hand. One boy said, "Hey, we can't do it. It's our parents. You don't have to do nothing other than lure them down here to this cave. I'll do the rest. I'll make sure nobody ever bothers you and you have all the food you want. Periodically, I might ask you for a favor." Well, them boys not too bright. They nodded. Said, "We got a deal." They nodded again. "It's okay, go on in that cave. Get you all you want to eat." Them boys went in there, and my God, there was food everywhere. All kinds of food. There were pies, all kinds of stuff. Well, they was cramming their little mouths just as full as they could get it, reaching hands into pies, eating it with their hands. They didn't know how to use no utensils, nothing other than a knife. When they was done, their old bellies was popped out there. They started to leave that cave, and they was looking around for this shadowy figure. Except that shadowy figure wasn't nowhere to be found. So, that night, they went up and slept in an old barn that they had run across, and curled up in that straw and went to sleep. They had a full belly. Well, later that night, almost morning, they woke up and decided they better get home before somebody sees them. Now, they'd run all over them hollers, stealing and plundering. They got home, and old Pop was waiting for them. "Where's tonight's food, and where you guys been?" "We almost got caught." He said, "Yeah, 'cause your damn bellies, look at them, they're full. What's me and your ma supposed to do tonight?" Well, the one boy was just slightly smarter than the other and more devious. He said, "Well, Paul, we found a cache load of food that's not being guarded. But it would take me, my brother, and both you to help carry all that food." Why, shit, old Paul's eyes light up. He went and got them all up, and back up in them woods they went. Up and down the hills, till they finally come to that cave. And all that smell of that food was coming out. It was almost hypnotizing to them. Well, them boys done had it in their heads that tonight, them two gotta go. So they said, "Well, Paul, we'll do the lookout because you're stronger. You go in there, you and Mom get the food, and we'll come behind and get the smaller stuff." Well, they entered the cave. The fire's still going in there. And right behind them two boys, that big shadow appeared. He goes, "You boys going home. There'll be food in your little shack. You go on and go home. I'll take care of this. But I'll be calling on a favor." Well, as them boys headed back through them hollers, that light in that cave went out. There was only a couple screams come from that cave. Well, that scared the hell out of them boys, and they ran. They ran all the way home. Well, sure enough, just like the shadowy figure promised, there was all kinds of food. There were pies, apples, all kinds of good food. Big old ham. But them boys locked the door in that house, and they curled up in their little bed there on the floor and went to sleep. Well, they'd slept all day because they was full. Come that night, they decided not to do no pillaging, but they'd go scope some stuff out. They was going to go watch and see where the best tomatoes were growing, the best cabbage, and the fattest milk cow. See if any of those people got some new chickens. Go check out the egg population. They go out scavenging. Just looking for a new opportunity. Well, sure enough, down there on Sugar Creek, they come across the cabin. They watched from up there on the hillside and watched them people moving around down in those cabins. Well, the lady of the house went into the washroom, and she was in there washing off, taking what they call a horror's bath. There was a curtain around, a couple blankets around so nobody could see in, but you could see the big tub underneath there. So they figured that's what she was doing. Well, they hadn't got around to hurting anybody yet. That would be coming soon. Well, the lady come out with her night clothes on, and the husband went in and washed himself off real good. Then the lantern went up these little loft. All of a sudden, the lantern went out. Well, them boys sat there and waited for a while, make sure they was good and asleep. Because Paul told them well. So after probably an hour or two, they headed down there. While they was up at them windows and they was peeking in, they'd rub on the window and they'd look in, see if they could see anything. Well, they couldn't see much of anything, but that was the house they was going to keep an eye on. They got low on food, they going to check this place out. Well, them boys left that house and headed down that old dirt road. They was whistling like birds and stuff, trying not to draw no attention, see? 'Cause that's just sounds of nature, you know. You hear them birds sometimes at nighttime be a whistling and chirping. And well, they got back to the cabin and they went in and started scarfing on some food there that they had that this shadowy figure left for them. Well, they got full, went in and laid down in their little pallets and fell asleep. They wasn't asleep maybe 2 to 3 hours. And all of a sudden, a rapping on that cabin door scared the hell out of these boys. They was like, well, who in the world could that be? Ain't nobody ever come up here hardly. So they decided they better answer the door so the door didn't get kicked in because it was getting louder. They got up, turned the little knob, and peeked out the door, and there was that big shadow being. Boys, I got a job for yous. I told you I'd be asking for a favor, and it's just a little bitty favor. Okay, what is it? I need you to dig me 2 holes. 2 holes? What for? You're gonna bury your parents. We're going to the cave to dig? No. They're out there in the backyard. You're gonna dig a hole, put them in it, cover it back up, and put some rocks on top of there. So, they did what they was asked to do. They got dressed and went out there, and there were 2 shovels there. Well, this dark, shadowy being just stood there and watched. Commenced to digging. They started digging holes. One was digging one hole, one was digging the other. When they got done, got the hole dug to this thing's specification, this being grabbed each one of the mom and dad and drug them over. One went in one hole and went in the other hole. He's now cover them up, boys. And when you're done covering them up with dirt, there's a pile of rocks. You put rocks all over that dirt. Then you go out here, find some moss and lay on top of them rocks and that dirt. Don't want no looky-loos start looking and catch on to our little venture. So they did what they had asked. They covered the bodies up. They carried those big giant rocks, put on the fresh dirt, and they commenced going around looking for moss to put on top of all that to kind of hide the digging spots. When they was done, they was pretty tired. They looked up, and this shadowy figure was gone. So they went on in the house and laid down and went to sleep. Well, every night after that, they go out checking places out to hit. They got so brazen that in that area, they would even break into people's houses. They would set up in the woods and watch people leave. And they'd go in and take shotgun shells for their shotgun, which was Paul's shotgun. They go in and steal butter, ice cream, you name it. I mean, they were professional hits. They would watch these people for days on end. wait for the opportunity. Well, about 2 years passed, and these boys were still running around. Hell, they were stealing kerosene for their kerosene lamp. All kinds of shit. Sometimes even clothes off the damn clothesline. I mean, that's how sneaky these two boys was. Well, a few years have passed, and people were getting tired of it. Well, these boys were denied every time. We ain't been doing nothing. We ain't left the place. Well, that's damn funny. Your tracks have been seen, your bare feet tracks. If we catch you boys, you're gonna be somewhere from one of these hollers and you ain't coming out. Knock the bullshit off. Well, these boys, we ain't doing nothing. We ain't doing nothing. Well, then how you surviving? We got a friend that brings us food. Well, nobody believed them. So one day, there was 3 young girls down there in Sugar Creek swimming, not bothering a soul, just down there swimming. Well, these 2 boys was sitting there in the woods watching. One of the girls said to the other 2, I gotta go up here and pee. They was like, well, just pee in the water. She goes, no, I gotta poop too. So they all splashed her and was laughing. The girl got out and walked up in the woods to do her business. These two boys got together. They killed that girl. Now they're afraid these other 2 are going to talk, so they sat back and waited. When those other 2 girls went looking for the one girl, they killed the other 2. Now, they wasn't the smartest crayons in the box. They were just gotten dangerous. So now they panic. Well, they drug them girls way back up there in the valley and dug holes, put them in there, put rocks on top of them, put moss. Well, come the following year during squirrel season, there was a hunter up there in them woods. Well, he screwed up. He had to go shit, so he set his rifle up against a tree, and then he walked away because he's going to come back there and set it. He didn't want to have to smell that shit. So he walked away from that rifle. Good little ways, and he proceeded to drop his drawers and commence to pooping. Well, lo and behold, them boys had been following him. They was going to steal his squirrel. Because sometimes them old boys down there would shoot from one hillside across the valley to another hillside. That means you had to go down the hill, cross the little small valley, back up the other hill, just get your damn squirrel. Well, these boys had done this for quite a long time. So, this time wasn't going to be no different. The only was, the guy was up there crapping. Well, the one boy headed for the rifle. The other boy followed the hunter up there to take a crap. Well, while this old boy is sitting there crapping, he looks up and sees this boy on the hillside watching him. He peeks around the tree and pulls his head back, kind of like old Bigfoot. He peeked around the tree. Finally, that old squirrel hunter was like, hey, what the hell you doing staring at me while I'm pooping? You some kind of Fruit Loop? Or get your ass on out of here. That boy peeking. You know when I get done crapping, I'm going to get my gun. You're going to wish you was gone. And all of a sudden, that hunter that's squatted down there pooping in the brush, he hears a twig snap behind him. When he turns around, there's the other twin standing behind him with that rifle aimed right at him. The guy said, dude, you kind of caught me at a disadvantage here. I'm sitting here pooping, talking to your brother, and you sneak up behind me with my own gun while I'm sitting here with my drawers down shitting. Why don't you put the gun down before anybody gets hurt? So far, no harm's been done. Just put the gun down. Boy wasn't having none of it. That guy gets done, he don't even wipe his ass. He just pulls his pants up, buttons them, fastens his belt, and he said, give me my gun. That boy's kind of staring at him, and he said, do you even hear me? Give me my goddamn gun. The boy just kind of smiled a little bit. He gave him the gun all right, the wrong end of it. He shot that guy right in the face. Killed him deader than a hammer. Well, the other boy come over there, and they're going to this guy's pockets. Go through his billfold. They drag him up a ravine, cover him up with a bunch of sticks and moss and mud. They take the gun and the shells. They head back home. Well, a few more days passed, and people get looking for this hunter. They found him all right. Right up in that holler. Shot right to the face. They couldn't find the gun. They found the empty cartridge. So they've decided they've had enough of this shit. Girls had went missing. They hadn't found them. They found the hunter. So all them people got together, the guys, and got talking. They formed a vigilante group. They decided, since that boys now have turned to killing, stealing's one thing. Killing innocent people is quite another. You gotta go. So that night, after all their families were asleep, those guys decided they'd meet down by the old church. Well, one by one, they all showed up with their lights and their guns and their dogs. They was going to catch these boys. Well, it just so happens, that night, that dark creature showed up again. He told me, he said, boys, I thank you for the killings. Now I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to make you immortals. You'll live forever. But I need one more favor. These people are hunting you. I'm going to make you bulletproof, but I want you to kill them for me. And boys like, are you sure? Haven't I kept my word so far? Okay, yeah. Go kill them for me. So these boys took off. They was going to kill this vigilante group. Well, them guys hunted and hunted and hunted. Hadn't seen them in none of the local areas. They decided to head back to that cabin. They just going to kill them boys in that cabin, and they find them. Up on one of them old lost paths goes up to an old cemetery. Up on the crest of that hill. Vigilante group come down to there with their dogs and their lights. And right ahead of them, about 200 feet, was these two boys. Walking straight toward them, staring at all of them. Acting like they don't even see them, but staring directly at them. And walking toward them just full of confidence. These guys kind of look at each other like, they must really be fucking nuts. Let's let them get closer. Now the two parties, the two boys and the posse, vigilante group, coming toward each other the whole time. Them boys got within about 30 feet. They both raised their arms. These people like, they can't be right. The one boy looked at him and he goes, shoot me if you dare. Then he put his hands up over his head and was waving like, come on. Well, these guys kind of fanned out across the old road there, and they opened up fire. Riddled them boys. I mean, just slaughtered them. They got done, the firing stopped. They shined their lights, and there they laid. Deader than two mackerels. Just past where the boys fell, this big black shadow. And all of a sudden that shadow raised his arms up. Them boys stood right straight back up. Now these are full-grown guys and got mean old hounds. They opened fire again. Again, these boys fell. The shadow thing raised his arms up again, and them boys raised up. Let me tell you something, that vigilante group took off. Later that night, that house with them boys, that old shack where them boys had been living, burnt that night up there in them hills. Even today, people sleep up there when they used to not sleep up there in them woods, in them homes. They never locked their doors. They do now. And periodically, a door will be broke, a window will be busted, and there'll be a gallon jug of milk missing out of the refrigerator, maybe a dozen eggs. If they got chickens, maybe a couple chickens. Now, this went on to present day. They've had I don't know how many people go up in that area trying to find these two boys' resting spot. They figure if they could find it, they'll put a wrought iron fence around it. That should keep them in the grave. If they're in the ground. But legend has it that there was a shadowy figure that roamed them hills far back as people can remember. Now they got this shadow thing roaming the hills, and these two dead boy ghosts now. Two lost boys. So if you ever move up in that area, Liberty Ridge and Sugar Creek in that area, you make sure you keep your windows locked, your doors locked, because you never know when these boys are going to show up and just where. So, just remember, it's a true story. You don't believe me? Go up in those hills down there along Sugar Creek late at night. See if you don't run across them. If you do, the best thing I can tell you, you better hope you got a candy bar in one hand and a ham in the other. Either that or you better be a track star. 'Cause there ain't no cops for the dead. They just kind of do what they want. These things still go on today up there. Sometimes people leave change in their cars up there and get up next morning and find their window busted and that change gone. Or they might have a pack of gum laying there in the console and window busted and the gum's gone. There's even been dogs up there tied out. People quit tying them out because they get up next morning and find them dead on the end of the chain. They've been beat to death with a big stick or a big rock. So like I said, this has been going on for years and it's still happening. There ain't much they can do about it except try to take precautions. But just know this. Any deal that's ever been made with evil comes back to bite you in the ass. And these two boys made a deal with some dark entity and they paid. Now they're forever this evil entity's weapon, slaves, whatever you want to call it. They'll never get no rest. If their bodies could ever be found, their remains, they could put them to rest, where they would rest in peace. But until then, it's going to have to run its cycle. Well, there's my story for tonight, and it is a true one. It happened up there in that Sugar Creek bottom area and up in those hills, and people are still terrified nighttime. Nighttime comes, they ain't outdoors. They're in the house reading their Bibles and saying some Hail Marys, hoping that these two boys and this dark entity don't show up. But that's what happens when you make a deal. You never get the good end of the stick, and you never get really the prize that you're promised. It usually ends up being you get taken for a fool. You wind up serving that master. And I know something about that because my handlers were probably just about as fucking evil. I got away from them. These boys never did and never will. Until somebody can put them to rest. I hope you enjoyed tonight's story. Like I said, it is true. You don't believe me? Get you a tent and go up there and spend a week in that area. When you come running out of there, then you'll know for a fact. Well, y'all take care, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Henry saying good night. Thank you for watching.